17, I ran away from home and from everything I had ever known. I was sick and tired, living in a town filled with narrow minds and hate. They used to laugh at me, their children called me names. I would run and hide, feeling so ashamed just for being born. I was just a boy, punished for a crime that was not mine. Life ain't so easy when you're...
Hello, hello, hello. And thank you so much for tuning in to A Spoonful of Comfort. I am Claudrine Jackson. I am your host for A Spoonful of Comfort, reminding you and me that there's so much discomfort going on in the world. But we're not a part of the discomfort. We are the ones that are giving comfort. And even my son, who is disabled, wants to give comfort. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for the privilege of your time. It's a blessing to be able to speak to you every week. I thank R.J. Watkins and Henry Tyler for keeping this platform available for those of us who have something that we want to express. I thank the people who have donated to the Purvis Jackson Foundation, who have donated through the Network for Good, through Facebook. You have been anonymous, so I don't know who you are, but I thank you. And I thank you for having that kind of a heart to want to help people with handicaps. I have a very special guest here today, but first I want to congratulate the Detroit Youth Choir.
Yes.
If you've seen them on America's Got Talent, you see how good they are. And I want to congratulate them because whether they win the big prize or not, they're winners for have gotten this far. And as a retired Detroit public school teacher, I am so proud of them. And I am proud of Mr. White, who's their director. They have accomplished so much, and I hope that it continues. Now, my husband, if you've seen the show before, you know that my husband was Purvis Jackson, the bass singer of the Spinners. Well, that's where Purvis started singing, in a Detroit public school choir. So we don't know what is in the future for these young people. And that's why I'm wearing purple. Detroit has gone purple in support of them, and they deserve our support and our encouragement. So congratulations to the Detroit Youth Choir. However it turns out tonight, you are still winners. So now let me introduce my special guest. I am very pleased and honored to have him as a guest on my show. This is Brian Piccolo.
Yes.
And should I say Minister Brian Piccolo?
Oh, Pastor Nelson is fine.
Oh, Pastor Nelson, okay. So we are really thankful to have you on the show. Mm-hmm. And you are going to tell us about the Detroit Legacy Foundation and what you are doing. But first of all, do you want to give us a little background on yourself?
Well, as I came up through the ranks here, I was in the military. I was a military guy. Came through the Marine Corps, came out in 1979. And then I saw on television, because I used to be an avid Soul Train watcher. I watched it every weekend. Went into the military, came out, and I turned back on the TV looking for Soul Train, but then I saw another television show on the air, and they were dancing. So I asked my partners, I said, what is this on the air? Because it wasn't on the air before I left. They said, oh, well, it's called The Scene. It's called The Scene. They're down there on Jefferson. They record every week. And I was like, oh, wow, I was really, really amazed at that. And that was in 1979. So I came down to the scene. I got on the program. I danced for about a month or two, but I was very inclined with the communications. Yes. I was in that in the military, so they found out that I had skills in lighting and directing and things of that nature. So they brought me off of the dance floor and put me behind the scenes. And Nat Morris started grooming me and grooming me and grooming me to make me the person that I am today. So I pay homage to Mr. Nat Morris, who was very instrumental in my life. I call him my goddad. He taught me a whole lot in the industry. And I moved up to be a director. I had my own couple of television shows. I went into the military. And when I came out, like I said, I just didn't know what I was going to do. And then I got under the wing of Mr. Nat Morris, and he just took me and brought me to a heights that I couldn't even imagine. Mhm.
Thank you. Nat Morris was a force in this city and still is. You know, he's got quite a legacy.
Yes, he does.
So I'm glad that you mentioned him, that you are part of his legacy. Now, can you tell us about the Detroit
Legacy.
Sunrise
Yes,
legacy?
Yes. Well, we named the Detroit Legacy Sunrise for two reasons, because we're in Detroit and we have such a great legacy. Everything about Detroit is a legacy in itself. You're even a legacy. Your husband is a legacy. Everybody that we come in contact with, we have reached the world in so many ways. And so Detroit Legacy Sunrise, because the sun is always going to shine. No matter how gloom your day may feel,
Thank you.
the sun is going to shine again. So Detroit Legacy Sunrise is the organization by which we're doing our 40-year milestone celebration, which I'm here to talk about with you today. We're doing that, and we're doing a number of other things come the year 2020.
Okay. Could you tell us about some of the people that are going to be honored?
Well, like you say, and everybody say honored, awarded, or inducted. Actually, it's none of that. We're actually just celebrating those.
Recognizing.
Yes, we're celebrating those. It's a celebration. You know, I talked to Martha Reeves here recently, and she told me, you know, dancing in the streets, Martha Reeves.
Right.
She told me here, she said, man of God, this is a beautiful thing that you're doing, because I would love to smell my flowers while I'm still yet here. To smell my flowers. I want to celebrate with those that's going to celebrate with me even after death. But it's just a great feeling to smile, laugh, touch, grin with those that are still here in the land of living as we celebrate you.
And you're documenting. You're documenting some of the history. And I'm so proud of that. And I'm so thankful to be invited to be a part of it. And it's who are the Detroit Sunrise people? Is it a group of you ministers or?
No, actually, it's something that I came up with because I felt like I needed a platform. I've always been a humanitarian, which means you're looking out for the rights and human rights of others. You take others in high precedence over yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we're humanitarians in our own right. You know, we fight for civil rights. We fight for autism. I had a family member that had autism. Your son had autism.
Yes.
And so all of these things fall under that legacy. So the Lord gave it to me to name our organization the Detroit Legacy Sunrise. And so that's what we're doing. And I have on this list here quite a few people that we're going to be celebrating even on that day. It is October the 13th coming up. October the 13th at 3 o'clock. We'll be at the Dearborn Performing Arts Center in Dearborn. And you all, I decided to honor you and what I say celebrate you because Mr. Edward Davis told me about you. I knew about you. I seen you a few places. We bumped into each other at different functions and things like that. And so then he said, no, she's way more than that. She has an autism foundation. She did this. She's the wife, the widow of Purvis Jackson. I was like, oh, wow, all of these accolades that you have are legendary. And so that's legendary status. So that's to be celebrated. So we're going to have you come out and be amongst the likes of Mr. Ron Scott. Ron Scott was very dear to us here in Detroit, Michigan. He was a civil rights activist. He kind of like Al Sharpton was for New York City. Anything went wrong in the city of Detroit, we felt like we weren't being treated properly through the system. Ron Scott was one of them that go to your rescue and try to find out how he can eradicate the situation that was going on in your life. And so he's great. He's one of the great ones. You have Mr. R.J. Watkins, the CEO of this station that we're on, that's going to be celebrated. Mr. Henry Tyler, his vice president. These kind of people here have stood the test of time, you know, because a lot of times, you know, when you're growing up, especially in the 70s when I was coming up, I wanted to actually be a lawyer. But they told me, well, you can't be no lawyer. Don't even try. You know, a lot of times they told you what you couldn't do versus what you can do. So I applaud these people such as R.J. Watkins and Mr. Henry Tyler who stood the test of time. They've been doing this for quite some time, 30 years.
Yes.
They just celebrated. Yeah. So this right here needs to be recognized while they can yet still be here to smell the flowers. Yeah, they'll name a street light after them, a street pole after them. We'll do all of those things when someone leave our presence. But how about celebrating them while we're yet still here?
I'm so thankful that you're doing that. I write books and do. I think things should be documented. If our history isn't documented, it'll be lost. So I thank you for thinking of documenting these things so that it'll be in the archives for posterity. I learned a word, perpetuity.
Perpetuity. Yes, yes, yes.
Now, before the show, we were talking a little bit about your history when you were a youngster. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in music and in the entertainment business?
Yeah, because my dad, and I always call him my dad, Mr. Rudy Robinson.
Who
He had
was a
group
friend
called-
of mine.
Okay, okay. And he had a group called Rudy Robinson and the Hungry Five. And him, the Detroit Emeralds, Cody Black, these kind of people, Fantastic Four, all those kind of people back in the day were over our house a lot. Him and James Brown was real close friends too. I love James Brown. That's another one of my goddads. But I came up in that instance. He had the organ in the front room. They were dealing with sheet music back then. Everybody read off of sheet music back then. And they would rehearse all the time at the house. And so I found that intriguing. It got into my spirit. So I always had that near and dear. I used to go down to Watts Club with them. I used to go to the 20 Grand with them as he performed and things of this nature. So Spinners, Four Tops, all these kind of people, we had their records in the house all day long. Little would I know that in this day and time that I'll be sitting next to the widow of Mr. Purvis Jackson, one of the great spinners. I love the Spinners.
Their music, as was all Motown music, clean. You didn't have to worry about the words that were going to be appearing on the music. Now, when I was teaching, my students would come in singing some of the rap songs and some of the music that they'd heard, and I would say, you can't sing that in here.
Okay.
But Miss Jackson, my mama let me sing it. I said, but you're not going to sing it in here. This is a room of education. I want you to hear appropriate music, real music. So I would play Motown music for them during relaxation time. After lunch, they'd come in, we're having relaxation time. So I would play some of the Motown music. Never had to worry about a bad word popping up.
Never.
Or and the lyrics told a story or had a message. Music today doesn't have the messages that music back then had.
No, not at all. And, I was just getting back onto the subject of the celebration.
Yes.
Because I believe it's very important to know that, Rosemary Robinson, she was one of the first women legislators to go up in Lansing.
Wow.
She just retired. Her son, Mr. Isaac Robinson, he's now have her seat. We was able to get him elected. He's the District 4 representative for the state of Michigan, and that man of God is doing awesome things. So I want to give a shout out to them. They'll be there. Actually, right now, he's on the picking line with the UAW members, encouraging them on, as we go through this strike, and it's very important because we have mouths to feed, families to feed, and things of this nature. And so they're on strike now for that purpose. So we want to lift up our UAW workers and encourage them to stay on that front line. As well, we want to encourage our Detroit Youth Choir as they move forward.
I am so proud.
And we want to say hallelujah and thank you to all the parents and want to wish all the parents well because they've been in this thing with them. It's been like 4 weeks now. They've been in California. And everybody from the jobs that those members work at, everybody is playing a big part in making sure this thing can go forward. So, yeah.
And as I said, they deserve our congratulations, whether they win the big prize or not, because they have accomplished something good, even for the city of Detroit.
Yes.
And they have the city of Detroit behind them. Like I said, they determined my outfit today.
Yes, they did.
I wore purple in support of them. They even have the Spirit of Detroit statue dressed in purple today.
Yes. So.
Purple is kind of their color. But Mr. White, who directs them, he mentioned yesterday or whatever the last show they were on, is that he's getting all the accolades, but they have a choreographer. They have other people that's working with him. So it takes a village. And I've always felt that it takes a village. It took a village to get me up off my knees from crying about autism because I couldn't cure my son. It took a village to get me up off my knees to get back out into life. So between scriptures and gospel songs and people and listening to positive words of inspiration, that's what helped get me together. And I feel like we're all here to support each other. So supporting the Detroit Youth Choir, I thank everyone who's supporting the Detroit Youth Choir because the city of Detroit has really gotten behind them.
Yes, they have.
They've gotten a lot of votes, and I've talked to people that have said they voted 10 times. I can't say that I've voted 10 times each time, but they have my congratulations, my encouragement, my appreciation.
Yeah.
I'm so proud
Yes.
of them. As a former Detroit public school teacher, I'm so proud to see what our public school students can do.
And it's quite a few of them in that choir. And like you said, they're doing a marvelous job. And we do want to let them know that they have all of our support. And I'm going to claim it. They're going to win it. I'm just going to claim it. Like you said, if they win it or not, they're still heroes right here in the city of Detroit and around the world. They have captured many a heart in this country called United States. They really have.
And speaking of me liking things documented, they've been documented.
They're going to be at the in the Thanksgiving Day Parade this year in November. They're going to do that. They're doing a bunch of other things. Everybody is calling, trying to book them to do some things. So prosperity is in their corner with this.
Yes, yes. And I say my husband, who became a world-known celebrity through singing with the Spinners, got his start singing in Detroit public schools. He said that Purvis was the bass singer. He said that they used to laugh at his voice and call him Froggy because his voice was so low. And one of the choir directors in the school said, well, we need a bass singer for the choir. So why don't you try out for that? And that was it. He went from being Froggy to being the bass singer. And Purvis was basically my mentor too, because doing media wasn't anything in my plan. I like to write. We wrote songs together. That's how he knew I could write. So we wrote songs together, and that was all that I really wanted to do is to write. But he knew I could write, so he wanted me to write a book about our son's condition, because my Purvis Jackson Jr. was born in 1975, and people hadn't heard of autism then. We hadn't heard of autism. And 1975 was the year they quit putting them in institutions, which is why we hadn't heard about autism. So basically, me being on radio and TV, that was Purvis pushing me. But I'm glad that he did. I'm glad that I have a voice. My son cannot speak. So that's one of the things that pushed me to get out and speak, because he needs to be spoken for, as do other people in his condition.
Yes.
Because he is a intimidating looking black man who can't talk. I would feel remiss if I didn't try to make sure that the community is prepared for people like my son. He is very well protected, and someone is always with him unless he walks out of the house, which is what happened. He walked out of the house one day with me. I'm supposed to be watching him. I did not know he was out of the house. The police were called on him, but it could have turned out so much worse, because he's not the person that if the police say, raise your hands or halt, he's not going to respond. So it could have been so much worse. But a lady started talking to him, and he came back home. He knew his way back home. And she was ringing my bell, and I thought, why is this stranger ringing my bell and talking on the phone? But she was canceling the police call to say that he's not on the streets anymore.
Right.
He went home, but he was in his pajamas barefoot.
Okay.
So it's people like that that make me aware of how blessed I am. I am one of the more fortunate people, and I feel that God wants those of us who are more fortunate to take care of the less fortunate.
Less fortunate, yes, yes.
And my son is definitely one of the less fortunate. He knows nothing of what his father has accomplished. He knows nothing of what his mother is doing. But he's my inspiration. That's why my book is called Inspired by
Inspired
Autism.
by autism.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And you said would you pass the book on to whoever is in the family?
Of
that
course.
You said yes.
Yes. My family we have an autism child in our family. He grew up to be about 16 years old and he passed. He passed at about 17 years old. So autism is very close to me. I know about it. Back in the day, we didn't know about autism. We called them retards and things of this nature, but it's a definite illness and a definite disease, and we need to find a cure for it, and more awareness and more education on it so they can be well accepted, because they're really not bad people at all, actually.
Right. They're pure. I have a poem that I wrote about my son called A Love So Pure, because his love is pure. I'm going to share a poem if you don't mind, that I wrote. One of the reasons I do these shows is to share my poetry. Now, this is a poem I wrote when I turned 79, but I would not read it. And people were saying, don't tell your age, don't tell your age, don't tell your age. So I had to turn 80 before I would start sharing this poem. And after the poem, you're going to give people the information again about the Legacy Foundation. This poem is called I'm 79. I'm 79 and I feel fine, and that's a sign that I still have time, that God's not through with me or you. Now, what can we do to start anew? To help the situation, to build a better nation, we need an education. We need a revelation of how to do our part to never break a heart. It's time for us to start. Now, in the future, for me, it's my destiny to help and to bless, and I will do no less than God's plan for me, to walk in the light, to do what is right. Now is the time to give God praise, and I will be praising him for the rest of my days. Reaching 80 gave me some courage that I didn't have when I was younger. There's a scripture, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans for hope for a future. So I'm just thankful at age 80, I still believe that scripture is meant for me as well as for younger people. So I thank you so much for listening to my poem. I thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
So please tell us more about how people can get tickets and repeat.
Okay. Well, yes. Once again, it's the Detroit Legacy Foundation that we're doing. It's not really a foundation. It's a movement that we have, the Detroit Legacy Sunrise. It's a movement that we have to continue to empower our people to bring forth new legacies and things of that nature. It's called the Detroit 40-Year Milestone Celebration. We're having that October the 13th at the Ford Community Performing Arts Center there in Dearborn, Michigan at 3 p.m. You can go online to eventbrite.com. That's DetroitCelebration.eventbrite.com. Once again, DetroitCelebration.eventbrite.com, and you can reserve your tickets there, or you just come at the door. Make sure you're there. Got lots of great people. I have Greg Dunmore is going to be our host, and Miss Neen Bailey, who is the floaters. Mr. Charles is her dad, and they'll be hosting it for us, and lots of other great things going to be going on.
And could you give us the time again?
Yep. 3 o'clock in the afternoon there on October the 13th, one day after my birthday. So it's my celebration for my weekend, for my birthday weekend.
I'm so looking forward to it. And
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that you're doing this. All of us who are trying to accomplish something, it's good to know that somebody cares.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes you get so downhearted that are your efforts in vain?
You feel like it is, but the Bible tells, "Be not weary in your well-doing," because in due season you will reap if you faint not. He said, "Be steadfast and unmovable, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord," because everything that you're doing is noted, and God really appreciates it. The man might not appreciate it, but God appreciates all of our accomplishments. He gave us that great gift to accomplish and to succeed, and so we should move on that.
Yes. I agree 100%. And I'm so thankful that Detroit is looked down on in some areas, because when I'm traveling, people will say, "I know you're not still living in Detroit. I know you're not still living in Detroit." And I'm always saying there are good people in Detroit.
Yes,
there are
yes.
good people in
Yes,
Detroit.
yes,
There are
yes.
good neighborhoods in Detroit. Detroit is a wonderful city. So I'm so glad that you're doing something for the city of Detroit.
Well, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for allowing me to come on this program on today. And I'm just, so you said that poem was called "I Am 79." And so at 79, you wrote the poem.
Yes, but I wouldn't recite it.
And you wouldn't recite it. So then when you turned 80 here recently,
I got enough courage.
you got
to-
enough. And this woman of God is 80 years old. Can you believe that? I mean, not to say because black don't crack.
Yes.
And black is always good. So we are to pay homage to you. We
Thank you.
celebrate you for
Thank
all
you.
that you've done.
Thank
You're a
you.
positive influence.
you.
You always take us to another height.
Thank you.
And we just want to applaud you on today. And we thank you for doing all that you do. Your labor is truly not in vain. And God sees your work, and we do too. So
Well,
we thank you.
Thank
We
you
really
so
do.
much. And thank you for being a guest on my show. And I'm so thankful that at age 80, I still have my faculties, most
Yes,
of them,
yes,
and
yes.
mobility.
Yes.
And I'm required to show that you can reach a certain age and give something back.
Yes.
So thank you so much for tuning in to A Spoonful of Comfort. Thank you so much, Reverend Nelson, for being a guest on the show. And please tune in next Tuesday at 1:30 right here on WHPR for A Spoonful of Comfort.
When I was 17, I ran away from home and from everything I had ever known. I was sick and tired, living in a town filled with narrow minds and hate. They used to laugh at me, their children called me names. I would run and hide, feeling so ashamed just for being born. I was just a boy, punished for